Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the board of the conference who invited me to present at in this forum. On September 28th, 1916, Jung approaches his soul, saying that he wants to tackle something that is dark to him, the magical. He assumes that she can teach him, but she claims that these matters are dark to her also, and explains that she can only help him to uncover what he already knows himself. She seems to be talking about her role in helping him to bring his repressed memories to consciousness. But at this point, she describes a vision of something hazy in a dark forest and begins to reveal some strange symbols to him. She says he has picked up something that does not belong to him, something magical and poisonous. I warned you about magic. Devilish stuff gets into you, she says. Fast forward to 10 days later, 9th of October. This is where Jung has undergone a series of mysterious preparations that seem like magic to him, but are confusing on so many levels. So he presses his soul to at least provide a glimpse into what all of these fantasies are about. And she answers with a series of rhetorical questions. Temples in deserts, secret societies, ceremonies, rituals, colourful robes, golden images of gods of terrible aspect. She then adds, none of them, as if taunting him with answers and then retracting them. The black books were published in late 2020, but 2 years earlier, my own study of the Red Book had arrived at the conclusion that Jung's disturbing excursions into deserts, his sense that he was undergoing strange rituals, meeting biblical figures and terrifying gods, was somehow to do with a form of ritual theatre, and that the secret societies were involved. It demonstrated that most of the fantasies were closely related to Masonic rites that were practiced in Switzerland during Jung's childhood and youth, and argued that Jung's active imaginations appear to be memories of a series of terrifying initiations in childhood that today is known as ritual abuse. The American Psychological Association defines ritual abuse as organised, repetitive, and highly sadistic abuse of physical, sexual, and emotional nature, perpetrated principally on children. The abuse is reported as using rituals and symbols from religion, the occult, or secret societies. It may also include the creation of pornography or the selling of sexual access to children. Victims may be forced to engage in heinous acts, such as the killing of animals, as a means of coercing their participation and silence. When Jung's soul mentions the secret societies, we see that some part of him knows that what these active imaginations might be about. But why does his soul try to confuse him about this? A better question is she really his soul? Throughout the Black Books, Jung is in frequent contact with his soul. At first, he embraces his renewed connection with her. Once I adored you, he says. Then I loved you. Now you threaten to become contemptuous to me. In the early fantasies, she goes through various changes, beginning with a little girl, but eventually becoming a diabolical woman with an extraordinary amount to say. She becomes his manipulator, providing seemingly wise advice that often contains a hidden barb. This provokes so much frustration and distrust in Jung that it emerges as a stream of criticism towards her, resulting in frequent bickering between them, much like a domestic argument. In response to her ongoing harassment, torment, and mockery of him, he calls her a raft of insulting names. At one point, in utter frustration, he says, "Go to hell, you old cocotte." And at another, he says, "You are not my soul, or are you?" My argument is that the female entity that Jung calls his soul is a false or ritual soul, created when in a state of shock and dissociation during the initiatory ordeals. In ritual abuse, the distortion of Christian teachings and the reversing of good and evil is aimed at confusing the child about his beliefs. Firstly, Jung is tricked into believing that the evil Salome is his soul and that he is as evil as her. Then, during the shock of the sacrificial murder, where he feels he has eaten the liver of a dead child, he is told that the shrouded woman there is also his soul. Despite realizing as an adult that his fantasies were mystery plays of some sort, Jung has nevertheless had these figures indelibly imprinted on his psyche during the original ordeals of childhood. These two figures have now merged into one overall concept of an evil female soul, which contains the attitudes and agendas of his original abusers. In my study of it, I go into the concept of perpetrator introduced. Sowing a deep-seated sense of confusion is one of the strategies of ritual abuse, and the use of magic magnifies this aspect. As the French anthropologist Marcel Mauss observed, the creation of a sense of confusion and chaos is central to the way magic works, with mythical spells and meaningless words playing a role. Jung asks his soul, "Why do you make this damn confusion?" She answers, "This perplexity is necessary. Everything must be mixed up together." The entry for September the 29th, 1916 is strangely bewitching. Here his soul describes a hazy or ghostly mist out of which some strange symbols emerge. She weaves a mysterious atmosphere about them and describes them as so chilly and northerly, so maritime. The Kabiri were minor Greek deities who were thought to offer protection to sailors and vessels at sea. Their mysteries were established on the island of Samothrace in the northern Aegean Sea and involved an enacted myth of the murder of Cadmilus, the youngest of the Kabiri, by his 3 brothers. Jung had copies of scholarly works about the Kabiri, so he must have felt that they had relevance to his inner life. The Kabiri are one of the ancient themes embraced in Freemasonry. The Masons regard them as being derived from the Egyptian mysteries of Isis and Osiris, and liken their central myth to the 3rd degree of Freemasonry, where Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's Temple, is murdered by 3 fellow workers. The Kabiri are also mentioned throughout Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, published in 1871, 4 years before Jung was born. This handbook for Scottish Rite Masons is still in use today. Albert Pike was an American polymath who played a key role in the development of the Scottish Rite, both in America and internationally. In the manual, Pike states that children of a tender age were initiated into the Kabirian mysteries. Morals and Dogma may provide answers to the curious symbols Jung is being shown here. In his journal, Jung draws the symbols freehand. They include a sign that means an upper and a lower one, divided lengthwise, making 4, 2 fiery circles, like eyes, empty sockets of fire, then 2 tiers of glowing glass burning upward, a grave that is empty, suggesting someone has risen from it, and a fork-shaped letter Y. His soul acts as if she is protecting him from a disgusting swindle and hellish sorcery, and wards this devil's filth away, telling him he must purify himself through his hard work so that the light becomes completely pure and white. The explanation for these symbols lies in Morals and Dogma on pages 58 to 62. Pike was a gifted linguist, and in his lecture for the 3rd degree, he includes a section on ancient words linked to sun worship in a variety of languages, including ancient Egyptian, Parsi, Hebrew, Phoenician, and others. The Parsi word Ker, the literal name of the sun, he says, also means the socket of the eye, accounting for Jung's soul's reference to eye sockets. This leads Pike to the word Kora, the ancient name for Lower Egypt, explaining Jung's first symbol of upper and lower divided lengthwise as a representation of Upper and Lower Egypt. I'll just move these a bit. Alongside the Nile. From here, Pike arrives at the Hindu name for the sun, Hari, which includes the concept of fire or flame. This leads him to the ancient festivity of Malkath, the winter solstice, where the sun god is reborn from a pyre on December 25th, linking Jung's symbol of the fire of the flame with the grave. In Egypt, it was Horus, he says, who was buried 3 days and regenerated, just as the Masonic hero Hiram Abiff was murdered and remained for 3 days in a shallow grave, thus answering Jung's soul's comment about the one who rose from the grave. Pike then talks of the hieroglyph of the elder Horus as a pair of eyes and the festival of Epiphany, when the sun and moon are in line with the earth, called the birthday of the eyes of Horus, tying it to Jung's symbol of the 2 fiery circles or sockets of fire. He then discusses the Hebrew letter Yod, progressing to the mystic character Y, the sacred word of the Hindus, explaining Jung's fork symbol. Pike also mentions the word Kur, saying that it means white or noble in Syriac, tying it to Jung's soul's directive that he must become completely pure and white. It appears that Jung's abusers have drawn on Pike's lecture for the 3rd degree in order to create a false atmosphere of evil magic by citing Pike's explanations completely out of context. Rather than clarifying the real nature of these symbols, his soul exaggerates their mysterious quality, building the horror and pretending to banish this witch's spell. As his internalized abuser, Jung's soul seems to delight in dropping hints about his initiatory experiences, which he cannot yet fully face, despite his search for answers amongst scholarly works. In March 1917, Jung's soul gives him more instructions about how to create the mystic light, and she again mentions the Kabiri. She tells him that he must continue building what the Kabiri have started, laying stone upon stone. Wheat must grow from the mud, and he must look towards the rocks. She then asks him if he hears the bell, and whether he has money on him. He must put it away, find water, and drink it, and then kindle the fire, his sword ready for the arrival of Phanes, the mystic light. She tells him if he is weary and she asks him if he is weary and tells him to rest, stay quiet, and wait for what is to come. In the next entry, 10 days later, Jung says he has rested and done what he could. Was that magic, a wish to force things, he asks? These mysterious preparations seem like magic to Jung, but again they appear to be a deliberate muddling of Masonic ritual and the accompanying teachings in order to create an atmosphere of confusing nonsense. They are a blend of 2 degrees, the 3rd and the 18th, along with elements of the Kabirian mysteries. The Kabiri and the laying of stones are discussed by Pike, who states that they were thought to be the same as the gods of Britain, who were worshipped by the Druids. Their worshippers, he said, were builders, and their temples were enclosures of unhewn stones, similar to the stone circles of Britain. Wheat growing from the mud relates to the Kabiri as described in Morals and Dogma. Alongside their role as the protectors of sailors and ships, the Kabiri were also gods of fertility and agriculture. Pike notes that the goddess Ceres was one of 4 deities worshipped at Samothrace. He notes that Masonry has preserved the ear of wheat as a symbol in relation to both Ceres and Persephone, who were goddesses who brought the civilizing effects of agriculture to men. Jung's soul question, have you money on you, and instruction to put it away, recalls the preparation of the Masonic candidate. Prior to his initiation, the candidate is told to divest himself of any metals, including money, symbolizing that a man's wealth plays no role in Freemasonry. In the 3rd degree, a bell is struck to represent midnight or low 12 when Hiram Abiff was murdered. While the instruction to find water and drink relates to the Samothracian mysteries, where the Kabirian candidate was made to drink from 2 fountains, the one called Lethe, oblivion, and the other Mnemosyne, memory, so that he lost the recollection of all his former crimes and preserved the memory of his new instructions and vows. Making the fire blaze appears to be a reference to the raising of the Kundalini fire to produce an ecstatic mystical state. In my study of the Red Book, I argue that Jung appears to have been trained in this process as a youth in the middle pillar exercise used in ceremonial magic. All these so-called preparations appear to be based on Masonic and magic rituals and Pike's wording used out of context in order to create more confusion and remind Jung of the frightening initiatory ordeals he appears to have undergone in his early years. The use of meaningless ritual words is a key feature of magic. On January the 4th, 1922, in Black Book 7, Jung asks his soul for advice about Tony Wolff. She tells him that Wolff is the emissary of the Great Mother, but is not aware of it, and reads a series of runes with strange hieroglyphics on them that are magical sounding but make no sense. Wegala, Wegama, Witrufit, Piatamari, Fandragipti, Remas. His soul gives him a ridiculously ambiguous answer, saying that these words are vaguely related to how to make a sublime husband, suggesting that he becomes the spouse of the noble pheasant bird of the Egyptians, and advises him to treat Tony Wolff misogynistically. Pike himself commented on the use of meaningless words in Freemasonry. He states that he searched in vain in the Hebrew and Arabic for some words used in the Masonic rituals, but found them to be utterly absurd and not legitimate words from these languages. It seems that the wording Jung records here has nothing to do with making a sublime husband and belongs to this category of the absurdly fantastic, created only to add to the luridly occult atmosphere of an Egyptian-style ritual that he appears to be recalling. As Shamdasani notes, Wolff was experiencing a similar stream of images. She was disoriented in the same mess. Such a statement begs the question of whether Tony Wolff was also a product of Masonic abuse and was carrying the burden of initiatory trauma, just as Jung was. Egyptian themes and magic may be appearing even in Jung's earliest entries in the Black Books. An important early dream on November the 15th, 1913, involves his children and a beautiful white dove. Here the dove turns into an 8-year-old girl, but before turning back into the dove, she says, "Only in the first hour of the night can I become human," while the male dove is busy with the 12 dead. This dream has elements of an Egyptian rite developed by the 18th century magician Count Cagliostro, who was regarded as a charlatan and Masonic impostor. In Paris, he was associated with Anton Mesmer and applied mesmeric techniques or crystal vision mixed with alchemy, sex, and magic during his rituals. He based his rite on elements from the Egyptian Book of the Dead and claiming he could summon the dead, magically creating phantoms in crystals or vases of water. This led to a surge of Egyptomania in the lodges that extended into the 19th century. In 1856, a version of this rite was adopted by the Swiss Grand Lodge when Jung's grandfather, C.G. Jung Sr., was its Grand Master. In the third degree, children played a role. They were called doves. In this ritual, one of the children would kneel in front of a globe of water or crystal and enter into a hypnotic trance where they would see visions and communicate with spirits. The girl dove wore a long white robe, and there was a circular tabernacle arrangement containing a dormitory for the 12 masters. It had 12 beds in a circle and one bed in the centre, in which the candidate would pray and have a temple sleep until he received divine light. Jung's dream appears to be a memory of a similar ritual from his own childhood. In many of his active imaginations, he mentions a crystal, so we could assume that each time he is referring to crystal vision, in other words, to hypnosis. In the Black Books, we see that Jung eventually tired of these complicated and next slide. In the Black Books, we see that Jung eventually tired of these complicated and meaningless discussions with his soul and turned back to his dreams for answers. These magical episodes were truly a Danaid's barrel of endlessness and meaninglessness that kept him searching for answers that would never come. The use of magic practices, including black magic, is a noted feature of the ritual abuse of children in the present era. In Masonic ritual abuse, it frequently involves Egyptian themes and magic, not unlike those that Jung portrays. Its aim is to thoroughly confuse the child into believing that powerful forces are controlling him. But as we have seen in Jung's case, it involves mere hocus-pocus and trickery. Accompanied by repeated occasions of traumatic shock, physical and mental torture, and usually sexual abuse, its aim is to shatter the child's psyche into multiple fragments, often resulting in dissociative disorders not unlike Jung's sense that his soul was multiple. Jung consigned these experiences to the collective unconscious. But what if his journals were to enable us to become more collectively conscious of the pervasiveness of these practices in Western culture? And finally, if you're interested in this argument, my first book on the Red Book was published in 2019, and the second on the Black Books was released 2 weeks ago. And they go into a great detail of how Jung's fantasies in both books are directly related to Masonic rites, but used in an abusive and distorted manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.